Hi everyone, Olivia here. Last year I posted a list of the films I loved on the channel's community page, and a few of you had suggested I make a video for next time, so that's what I'm doing here. Sorry it's all a bit late, I wanted to get this out at the tail end of 2023, but as you could probably tell from my voice, I'm not feeling too well. I think I've probably come down with COVID again, which isn't great, but I'm gonna just power through because I really want to share my favourite films from 2023. I'll be going by the UK release dates of each film, so there's a few films here that don't quite make the mark because they're released in 2024 within the UK. Of course, if you follow me on Letterboxd, some of you may already know my views on these films, and may already have some suspicions on the films I'm about to mention. But before we move into the rest of the video, I'd like to give a brief shout out to all the films I've missed this year. I'm disappointed as I'm eager to see these still. Either I've missed the screening, it wasn't screening near me, such as Anatomy of a Fall, or some films like Priscilla, The Zone of Interest, and Poor Things. They're coming out in 2024 in the UK, but I'm still dying to see them. I've been told that Dream Scenario, Bottoms, Godzilla -1, these are the types of films I will love. Because I haven't seen them yet, I can't have a viewpoint on them. So if you do follow me on Letterboxd, you'll eventually see my views on these films crop up once I've seen them. So the way I'm going to do this list is by giving 10 honourable mentions before leading into my top 10, so that the list feels more like my own personal choices. I'll be discussing how and why these films made it onto my list, while making sure to avoid any spoilers. So let's kick things off with the honourable mentions. So I want to start with a film that's presented like a single shot. Medusa Deluxe is writer-director Thomas Hardiman's feature-length debut that takes a darkly comic approach to a murder mystery behind the scenes of a hairdressing competition. It's a tightly directed, ambitious film that feels like immersive theatre, and there's some great scathing comedy during these intense overlapping arguments that makes the film all the more explosive. Each attempt to speculate on the identity of the true murderer and their motives ends up exposing the underlying tension amongst competitors, models, organisers, and everyone in between. It's a pretty damn thrilling roller coaster. My second honourable mention is a nuanced coming-of-age story, possibly an anti-coming-of-age story even, focusing on Freddie, a French adoptee who returns to South Korea to find her birth parents. When I was watching Return to Seoul, I felt so many complex, mixed emotions watching this film, due to its insistence of never providing clear answers, confronting the audience with distrust, awkward resentment, and destructive stubbornness, which all veils Freddie's insecurities, anxieties of isolation, from the language barrier to how she's perceived as Korean despite growing up in France, and her true wants in each situation she faces. Some of the scenes of failed reconnection, especially with Freddie's desperate father, are toe-curling to watch, but they're essential for the film's inspection of the challenges in reconnecting with people that Freddie never truly knew to begin with. A poignant, understated piece of filmmaking full of emotional complexity. Return to Seoul is certainly worth watching. My next entry is a thoughtful British realist feature-length debut drama on self-expression, identity, and emotional repression in the face of machismo. From Dion Edwards, Pretty Red Dress is a powerful, nuanced, intimate drama centering on Travis as he's released from prison, reconnecting with his daughter and partner. While struggling to reconnect with wider society, Travis finds solace in wearing his girlfriend's red dress, bought specifically for an audition as Tina Turner on the West End. Nate Jones is wonderful as Travis, troubled in the difficulty of balancing his expression of inner femininity with the societal masculine expectations, and Alexandra Burke in her first film role absolutely smashes it as the dominant yet insecure Candice. This is such a fascinating examination of a family hitting a crossroads in how far they can self-express, and how they adapt when obstacles are placed in their ways by those not understanding of what each family member here is striving for. It's a kind-natured, graceful yet absolutely eruptive drama that I feel is currently being slept on. My next entry is a beautifully animated film full of tenderness and visual excitement. Nimona feels like the queer film many of us within the community wished we had when we were younger. Based on N.D. Stevenson's science fiction fantasy comic of the same name, the shapeshifter Nimona befriends Ballister Boldheart, a knight framed for the murder of the Queen. The plan is to clear Ballister's name, but on their journey we learn that this outcast duo have both struggled to find a place where they fit in. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a strong sense that Nimona is intended as a queer allegory, specifically a trans allegory, due to Nimona's shape-shifting nature being reminiscent of the trans experience of having to go stealth, boy moding or girl moding, when it's unsafe to be their true selves, which feels very fitting and very personal, as N.D. Stevenson himself is a bigender trans man, and the reason why so many of us within the LGBTQ+ community have found this film so powerful is due to how it portrays outsiders finding where they belong, and to the immense pain that is felt when faced with hatred for who we are. Nimona isn't afraid to get dark, and I think many other queer viewers will find this one very emotional like I did. Maybe a bit more of an obvious choice here, but Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is my kind of blockbuster. The animation style is accurate to the comic book aesthetic, yet it also feels very much like its own kinetic, frantic vision as it expands on Miles Morales. The events of Into the Spider-Verse are essential here, but the tale at the centre of Across the Spider-Verse feels even more smartly ambitious. The stakes are much larger, the antagonist feels more challenging, but the film never sacrifices the essential core of Miles and Gwen's friendship, placing additional pressure on these two to come out to their parents as superheroes. Shifting cultural expectations within a modernising landscape is also a huge part of this film, and it makes for particularly captivating drama, which is appropriately applied to the science fiction multiverse hopping epic. I'm not the biggest comic book movie fan, but Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is the type of spectacle film I can really get behind. The amount of attention to detail, the intelligent portrayal of generational division, and challenging cultural norms feels so personal and carefully handled. This is a film worth celebrating. So I feel like 2023 Wes Anderson fans were spoiled, you know? I'm a massive sucker for anything he makes. I've been enjoying his meticulous toy box aesthetic he's been nurturing, especially within his recent work. His Roald Dahl Netflix shorts, and Asteroid City were some of my favourite films of this year, but didn't quite make it onto the top list. Asteroid City has become polarising amongst Wes Anderson fans, but I loved how it presented a meta-narrative that demonstrated how life can imitate art in its portrayal of mourning, how good-natured outsiders can bond together, and I especially loved how a joke would be set up in one scene to pay off moments later in the background of another. His Roald Dahl adaptations for Netflix are just absolutely splendid. Poison was brutal in its portrayal of how selfish discrimination is. The wonderful story of Henry Sugar has such satisfying growth for the titular Henry, played by a chameleonic Benedict Cumberbatch who clearly had a blast playing the multiple identities of Henry. The Ratcatcher is probably the closest we'll ever get to a Wes Anderson directed horror film, and The Swan was a depressing fable on the consequences of bullying. I loved these Netflix shorts so much that I could easily rewatch them again, but I have to wonder why they're not compiled into an anthology film instead for a theatrical release. I'd have loved to have seen these on the big screen. Nonetheless, Wes Anderson had a very strong year. Asteroid City may be better received over the following years, once rewatched a few times. This one may also prove to be a polarising choice. I think some may find it excessive, maybe a bit camp. Others might struggle to connect with characters who are so deeply unlikable. Or maybe it's not excessive enough, in your opinion. But I think that's completely understandable. But for me, Emerald Fennell's Saltburn proves that she's got a good sense for vicious, delicious dark humour. Oliver, studying at Oxford on a scholarship, befriends the wealthy, privileged Felix, who invites Oliver to his family's stately home of Saltburn for the summer. What unravels is a furious decimation of class prejudice and exclusion on a scale that is so gargantuan, it floods into every aspect of Oliver's stay. Barry Keoghan is proving himself once again to be one of the strongest actors of our generation, as his vulnerability, but also his quiet, intimidating demeanour feels so instantly believable and disarming. While some viewers may see what his ultimate goal is from a mile away, I don't believe you'll expect everything this character will do. Devilishly unpredictable, full of genuine resentment, with the intent of dismantling privilege, as well as amplifying its corrupting nature. Although there's an uncomfortable irony in a film about dismantling wealthy privilege when Emerald Fennell herself comes from that similar wealth. Saltburn is a terrible delight that had me gripped in its nasty, grotty talons. Maybe an unexpected choice, I don't know. This film is a strange, puzzling, ghostly folk horror enigma that's probably not going to be enjoyed by many people, but Ennis Main is an incredible follow-up to Mark Jenkins' earlier film Bait, which I also loved. as a voluntary researcher makes daily routine logs of a rare outcrop of flowers on an isolated island. It seems that ghosts of the past, local miners, maids, children and fishermen, as well as memories from her own life and from the land, all intermingle into an overlapping nightmare where time curves and history is so deeply imbued within the landscape that it can be physically felt. Ennis Main is a film with lesser narrative and more a striking, unsettling impression that creates an almost paganist dread inspired by rural Cornish histories and heritage of mining, fishing and faith. This will be an alienating film for most, but for viewers patient with Mark Jenkins' distinctive approach, a filmmaking style akin to 1970s public service films, Ennis Main will feel like discovering a lost cursed relic of a bygone time. A vibrant subversion of the British rom-com, Rye Lane is packed with effervescent charm, offbeat smart humour, and a thoughtful portrayal of the modern pressures of dating. Dom, having recently been cheated on by his then girlfriend Gia, befriends Yaz, who poses as his girlfriend during an awkward reunion with Gia and her new boyfriend. However, as they leave the reunion, Dom and Yaz become inseparable during their aim to fetch a record from Yaz's ex-boyfriend. At times, Rye Lane can be bonkers. Its sense of humour is so distinctive, and other times it's a relatable, touching testament to the challenges of modern dating. Full of personality, and a real love letter to the city of London, so full of human diversity and cultural exchange, Rye Lane feels like one of the best rom-coms in recent years. I enjoyed this so much I easily watched it again soon after I saw it the first time. So as the final entry of my honourable mentions, and I have to ask, who else to give us an origin story of one of cinema's and children's literature's most beloved chocolatiers than cinematic confectioner Paul King? I found Wonka magical from the beginning to end, full of imagination, whimsy, humour and adventure, while smartly stepping away from delving into the hyper-twee territory that films of this sweet nature can fall into. Timothée Chalamet, in my opinion, is another actor cementing himself as a young great, as he sings and dances through the film with such ease, but it's his gentle demeanour, infectious kindness, and sheer determination to chase after his aspirations that makes Chalamet as Wonka feel more than just a bag of quirks. This is the modern screwball comedy I can really get behind. A film about chosen families, about rebuilding trust, about chasing your dreams. And I think because of that, Wonka is going to become a modern comfort film favourite for so many people. Now, Wonka was really close to making it within my top 10 of the year, but these films have definitely earned their spots. In no particular order really, but these films were definitely my absolute favourites of 2023. This could be another polarising choice, and I think the criticisms aimed towards this film are understandable. It's long, it's indulgent, and it expects viewers to remain patient for extended sequences that may just test the endurance of the audience. I also think that if early on viewers don't click with the sense of humour here, and the heightened intensity of the anxiety-inducing scenes on display, and there's no shame in that, because this does feel intentionally like a difficult stress watch, then I can completely understand why people don't enjoy this. But I absolutely adored Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid. To me, it felt akin to greatly stressful comedy dramas like After Hours, Uncut Gems, The Truman Show, Murmur of the Heart, or Synecdoche, New York. The premise is deceptively simple. Beau must get home to his mother's house for the anniversary of his father's death, but when he's hit by a car and taken in by its driver to be looked after, it seems everybody is working against Beau and his every action. Beau is a deeply anxious, traumatised man, and that anxiety is shared with us in generous helpings through every surreal encounter, and some of these encounters will also feel way too uncomfortably real as well. If you struggle with anxiety or depression, Beau is Afraid is bound to be a difficult watch, but I feel like you may also find Beau as relatable too, in how he often ruminates over everything, tormenting himself over each action, mistake, or how an event can be perceived as a mistake on his behalf. Everything that happens to Beau is the worst case scenario that he feared. I personally feel that Beau is also relatable if you're autistic or neurodivergent. This is a character who tries his damnedest to make himself clear and non-confrontational in everything he says, and he still gets misunderstood. If you're autistic like myself, I think you'd know that feeling all too well. There's a magnificent reason why Beau is like this, and why he continues to face events that terrify him so much, but we're in spoiler-free territory here. Joaquin Phoenix is phenomenal as Beau. His every agitation, tic and internalised frustration can be seen worn on his face. Phoenix is an actor who knows how to interpret a complex, disturbing character history and wears it with such ease, like a glove. This is such a viciously brilliant cast too. Nathan Lane and Amy Ryan as the couple tending to Beau's wounds can be both hilarious and frustrating within the same scene. And Patti LuPone as Beau's mother would get an Oscar nomination if it was up to me. I can't elaborate too much on why I loved to hate these characters, but if any of this sounds interesting to you, then I think Beau is Afraid is certainly worth seeking out. My next entry is Rotting in the Sun, an audacious and wild film beginning as a darkly funny testament to depression and maturity at a crossroads, presented through Sebastian Silva's own fictionalised version of himself, who is encouraged to take a break at a drug-accepting gay nudist resort. But when a key event unfolds, everything completely changes. I'm not going to reveal what it is that happens, and that does make this film all the more difficult to discuss to the extent I want to, but it's a truly balls-to-the-wall confident shift that very few filmmakers could achieve. The amount of sharp wit, daring twists, damning apathy that clashes with newfound empathy makes Rotting in the Sun absolutely captivating from beginning to end, tying together three unlikely characters, a destructive, depressive Silva, a downtrodden housemaid, and an unexpectedly determined social media influencer that becomes even more enticing with how their motivations, personalities, and goals conflict. Keep an eye on Jordan Firstman because his comedic timing, endearing belligerence, and mixture of confidence and vulnerability as a fictionalised version of himself makes him a true genuine highlight here, and I hope he'll receive many more daring roles to come. I know I can't go too deeply into this film, so please go watch it knowing as little as possible, except maybe don't watch this with your family, because you should be prepared for hard cuts towards very real graphic sex. So every Mia Hansen-Løve film I've seen I've adored. Her films overflow with empathy, wisdom and understanding, charming, sometimes funny, yet relatable in their sense of tragedy too. One Fine Morning is another addition to her stellar filmography, offering a very touching, poignant story of Sandra, played with subtlety and nuance by one of the modern greats, Léa Seydoux, a widowed single mother, managing the challenges that arise with caring for a father with a neurodegenerative condition, finding difficulty in organising a reliable, comfortable care home for him. Alongside this, she begins dating her late husband's married friend, placing this romantic coupling between a rock and hard place where Sandra is confronted in whether she needs to remain putting her own needs on hold for others, and whether her own needs will even be fully realised. One Fine Morning is such a gorgeous film, capturing the authentic intimacies that form the majority of our memories, exploring how our pursuit for one's own needs doesn't mean we also have to violate our own conditions and boundaries. There's a trace of mourning in almost every scene. The mourning of a husband, the mourning of a father losing his mental capacity, which serves as a sobering reminder that loss follows us through thick and thin. But Sandra's comfort in her daughter, in her reading, in her partner Clement, which itself is complicated by a divorce that may or may not happen, places great emphasis on how we deserve to continue living too, in the face of monumental loss. I'm always going to think about the hugely endearing Christmas scene, where drunken parents recreate the event of Santa visiting to leave presents for the children. It perfectly encapsulates that balance of needing to provide for others, including all necessary illusions, while still satisfying their own wants and needs with a few too many drinks. There's always such a compassionate kindness in Mia Hansen-Løve's films that I just have so much patience for, and I think her films, especially this one, deserves all the praise they receive. So for my next entry, what a giddy delight theatre camp is. This is one of my favourite comedies of the year. Presented like a Pennebaker music mockumentary about a theatre camp whose founder is in the hospital, being run without her guidance by a clueless son, this was a film that was chock full of kindness, but scathing self-awareness too. This is a film that manages to playfully mock the dorkiness of wishing to perform, while also embracing the love and dedication necessary behind every production. The way this film manages to be both shady and compassionate sometimes simultaneously is just an absolute skill of tonal balance. I also adored how underneath the shadiness of the humour, there's an underlying sadness of unrealised dreams, friendships on the line, and the consequences of living in a competitive environment. I think Ben Platt and Molly Gordon encapsulated that effectively in their friendship as ex-campers turned camp instructors. Their friendship hitting a snag when Molly's Rebecca Diane is unable to give her undying attention to the camp's theatre productions. I can't help it either, but the songs from this film are completely stuck in my head, especially the finale tune Camp Isn't Home, which I've been playing on repeat since watching the film. The original music balances ironic, hacky songwriting with genuine heart, which reflects the tone of this film so beautifully. Ultimately, this is a film about outsiders finding a home away from home, the need for a sense of acceptance and community, a place to be accepted for your eccentricities and interests, your hyperfixations, which I feel that's such a poignant message to present to all the outsiders, young and old, who end up discovering this film. So this is probably a predictable addition to the list, but I just love that this summer we had one of the most unlikely double bills become the most anticipated cinematic event of the year. Oppenheimer feels like Nolan on peak form, shifting across a non-linear recollection of physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer's actions in working on the Manhattan Project, as well as the unravelling of political, personal and professional consequences as the atomic bomb is ordered to be dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer is delivering a career-best performance here, capturing humanity, vulnerability, insecurity, fear and a depth of self-reflection that can at times be completely present simply within his eyes. Emily Blunt as Oppenheimer's wife Kitty is also phenomenal, serving as the strong backbone that Oppenheimer lacks, but also struggling with her own difficulties, pushed aside in favour of the progress Oppenheimer strives for. It's often an explosive dynamic between these two, but even with how thorny their relationship can become, Kitty's portrayed as a woman with a determined sense of integrity that many of those who worked with Oppenheimer lacked. A 3-hour biopic on the Manhattan Project sounds like a dry premise, but Nolan does such a splendid job in turning these long conversations into a source of great suspense, filled with backstabbing, remorse, and profound declarations of hindsight, which serves as damning arguments for the benefits of disarmament. One scene in particular, which I won't spoil, made my heart sink. It felt like it belonged within a Lynchian nightmare, and it mirrored the gargantuan weight of guilt with terrifying effectiveness. This might honestly be one of Nolan's greatest films to date. Todd Haynes is one of my favourite modern-day American filmmakers, and May December reinforces that. A film focusing on an actress, Elizabeth, researching for a role based on a scandalous relationship between married couple Gracie and Joe. The more we spend time with Elizabeth and Gracie, we find similarities between the two, but it's with Gracie's husband Joe that we begin to realise the toll this relationship has had on him. May December is a very intelligent demonstration of melodramatic camp, of observant humour, but it's also a fairly disturbing exploration of romantic expectations, societal boundaries, predatory actions, the consequences of such actions, and also our relationship with depictions within the media. There's traces of Douglas Sirk and Ingmar Bergman here, but a consideration towards social and psychological impact on the characters affected by scandal is pure Haynes. It's difficult to delve too much into this film without revealing spoilers, so I'll end with saying that Natalie Portman and Todd Haynes' regular Julianne Moore are wonderful here. Their performances are often quiet, detailed and laced with enough passive aggression that their dialogue delivery may require a double take. But it's the actor who plays Joe, Charles Melton, who is proving himself to be one to watch. He's a deeply tragic character, and Melton's sensitivity, his generosity, his kindness, there's something intentionally hollow that betrays a whole depth of catastrophe within this character. Melton is so amazing here that I can't wait to see what else he's going to be performing in. Maybe another predictable addition, Martin Scorsese's ambitious, complex, dramatic retelling of the string of killings of Osage Nation members during the romance between Molly, an Osage woman, and Ernest, a war veteran seeking new work as a driver, may have a daunting length, but I was completely immersed in this tale. The level of research and empathy necessary to tell events like this with respect is immense, and amongst this there's profound reflection on the modern fascination and voyeurism for true crime, which excuses and erases the voices and livelihoods of the victims themselves. DiCaprio is great here. He's a foolish man who is contrasted by the wisdom and patience of Molly, played gracefully by Lily Gladstone. Lily is an actor who has such admirable control over the subtlest of reactions. Her smile is often tinged with pain, her eyes reflective of the heartache felt by her community. Lily as Molly is smart, she's funny, she's the kindest soul with a strong sense of integrity. She goes through hell and back, only to return stronger. I'm so glad this film is giving Lily Gladstone the much needed recognition she deserves, as the performances I've seen from her in the past demonstrates that she is a highly underrated talent. I also adored Robert De Niro here. His performance has layers that I'd love to elaborate further on, but I think it's better for viewers to appreciate his brilliance for themselves. This is an often disturbing film, and I think the subject matter is an essential one, too long erased by the wider public consciousness. There's so much this film is achieving here, while never sacrificing its empathy towards the Osage Nation. Some might think the film is too long, but I'm struggling to think what could really be reduced here. If anything, I feel Lily Gladstone deserved more time within the film than what she currently has. I have so much love for this film's courage to criticise the corruption, the voyeurism, and the erasure that normalised the killing of a significant number of people within a community who had their voices ignored for too long. Passages doesn't feel right to be summarised as a love triangle romance. I think that's not giving the film enough credit, it's something more complex than this. A gay couple has their relationship challenged when one of them begins an affair with a young woman. Franz Rogowski and Ben Whishaw here are magnetic in their authentic portrayal of attraction and repellence towards each other. Rogowski is so believable as the dysfunctional filmmaker who may either be uncertain of his own polyamory or he may simply be seeking to manipulate others for his own sexual gratifications. In fact, there could be even a chance that he doesn't know the answer himself. His chemistry with Ben Whishaw is undeniable, just as it is in the chemistry he shares with Adele Exarchopoulos. The heartache here is immense. Rogowski's next actions are often unpredictable, destructive, selfish even, and yet we can't look away. The ambitious observation present in the film is authentic, yet graceful. The final shot of Rogowski cycling, hurtling down a busy street is going to stick with me for a very long time. One of the easiest choices to make for this list for me was Greta Gerwig's Barbie. At this stage I've enjoyed everything Greta Gerwig has directed, and I love that she and Noah Baumbach's collaboration is inseparable because I adore the work they've done together. Barbie felt like a love letter to those 90s and early noughties campy comedies like Mean Girls, Clueless, But I'm a Cheerleader, and maybe even the classic Mel Brooks comedies too. The Powell and Pressburger influences aren't lost on me here either. Embracing a hyper-saturated aesthetic with such a funny, playful, and accessible approach to exploring the issues women and men face within a modern world that can't simply be resolved in the ways they once were. Nobody needed to fall in love in this, and the insecurities of both the Barbies and the Kens are given so much kind consideration that also manages to affectionately be funny too. It goes without saying how much I loved Margot Robbie as Barbie and Ryan Gosling as Ken. These two have so much charm, they just completely embraced the characters in a sincere, silly way that manages to be both joyous and heartfelt. The way Gosling doesn't miss a single beat, especially during his musical number, or the way Margot can balance self-awareness and ditziness with such a smart grace. I just loved them both here, and I can't imagine anybody else as Barbie and Ken. I think America Ferrera is wonderful here too, and it's a good reason why her monologue has gone viral across multiple platforms. It's such a damning criticism of the sexism that is inherent in almost everything, and it was so cathartic to hear it articulated so clearly and with such conviction. Barbie is splendidly goofy, and it's such a smart way of crafting goofiness as well. The feminist commentary is simple to grasp, but I think it's that accessibility that will resonate with a wider audience. The fact is, Barbie can also easily be watched as an empathetic film regarding a friendship turning sour, as well as a film about a woman's journey of self-discovery for her fullest potential, additionally as well as a man's journey to self-love and acceptance, what it means to be human, and I think it'll still hit those emotional peaks on each watch with ease. For me, this is a film that cemented Greta Gerwig as not just a great independent filmmaker, but she can clearly handle a blockbuster too, and it just excites me for whatever else she plans next. So my final addition to my top 10 here is Past Lives, one of those rare films that will quietly peck away at your heart before ripping it to shreds, and ironically it will comfort you as it does it. Nora and Hae Sung are childhood friends who have crushes on each other, but when Nora and her family emigrate to Canada, 12 years pass before they reconnect again via Skype calls, and another 9 years when they finally meet, their lives in very different positions to where they were during those Skype calls. This is possibly one of the quietest, gentlest films I've seen all year, a semi-autobiographical film which mirrors some of director Celine Song's own emigration and playwriting experience. In its subtlety and semi-autobiographical nature, I was reminded of Charlotte Wells' outstanding Aftersun, which left me feeling similarly heartbroken. Past Lives often focuses on the silences between characters and what those silences mean, but also the thematic focus on Inyon, the idea that the people we connect with during this current life are people or figures who we've had interactions before in past lives. It's so immensely beautiful that I couldn't help but fall in love with Past Lives because of this idea. I found great comfort in this concept that the people we know are people from our past, figurative past lives such as the person we once were 10 years ago, and literal past lives such as who we were before our current life, and there's a spiritual connection that will seemingly always bring them back together again. Greta Lee is deserving of all the praise she is receiving for her nuanced performance. She can be confident, content, vulnerable, sharp, funny, but tragic, sometimes within a single sequence. This is such an intelligent portrayal of an emotionally complex and highly personal character. It's hard not to be completely transfixed by Greta Lee's presence. There's a very smart way that Past Lives subverts the romantic cinema convention too, which I don't want to spoil, but if you have a certain expectation going into this film, it's likely to shatter. So those were my favourite films of 2023. I'd love to know which films you'd consider the best of the year as well. Feel free to post your top 10 in the comments. Let me know. A special thank you to my incredible tier Patreon supporter Gil, and to my super tier Patreon supporters Constantine Bombelli and Jamie.